Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final boarding call for the good ship SS tomorrow.
Today on The Friendly Futurist, the second human evolution. And welcome back on board the good ship SS Tomorrow. And today's guest is JJ Jerome. He's a fellow futurist. He's got a background in bioengineering, and he's going to talk about really big picture things and the state of the world, because I want to get you really thinking. If you consume doom and gloom in the press all the time, you're going to feel very doomy, but it's not the case. This show's about cautious optimism. It's about bringing positivity for good in a measured response. Now, it's very tempting for many people to vote. So, now I don't want to get into politics, but we need to think about not reverting back to a mythic past, but really a promised future. Where's that conversation? Now, JJ Jerome's been in the coalface of technological advancement. As I said, he's got a background in bioengineering, and he's got an alarming thing is about making humans are becoming less and less intelligent because we're relying more and more on technology. But if we have this conversation, that means we get work on our weak spots, because really, if we want to keep up with the machines, we have to become somewhat artificial in themselves. I know it's a very ick sort of theme, but logically, something needs to happen. Maybe we need AI as the main chair umpire to sort out our mess. These are great philosophical questions that we need to ask. Someone with years and seniority as experiences, JJ, will enlighten us with this conversation. Now, this is a long one, I must stress, but it's well worth your listen. JJ is coming up after the break. JJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Pleasure's all mine. Now, as with all my guests, please give my listeners a quick rundown on your journey so far. Start wherever you want to start.
Well, I've always been fascinated by two things. It's been electronics and the brain. And when I was 7 years old, I looked at a public access station every morning when I was getting dressed for school. And it was a public access station for doctors. And I learned all about neurosurgery when I was 7. Now, I didn't understand all of it, but I thought it was fascinating. And as I became older, I also became fascinated with electricity because it can do practically everything. It can make sounds, it can make pictures, it can move things, it powers our daily lives. So I decided to combine the both and go into biomedical engineering. My very first project was an implantable brain sensor, which was really a cool thing. Then I moved to consumer electronics and developed a number of cutting-edge technologies. Much of the home automation we developed, and I was the director of the Future Home Institute, and we were able to achieve technologies, early voice recognition. We actually designed and built a home that could support a person with quadriplegia 8 hours a day without any external help. The doors would open and close automatically just for this person. The lights would go on. Everything would be by voice recognition. We had some of the very early touch screens. And lately I've gone into energy efficiency and trying to use artificial intelligence to reduce greenhouse gases.
Well, quite a resume. Now, before we even go into my questions, I've got one little query. Because we're talking Neuralink, Elon Musk. Is that a bit of a concern? I mean, I certainly don't want Elon Musk chips in my head, but is that got a bit of the ick factor?
I think the Neuralink's a great invention for people with disabilities. We actually built some things for people with disabilities, and many of them could only communicate by blinking their eye. If they had ALS and similar conditions, they'd work on a keyboard And it would be a virtual keyboard, and each letter would light up for a second. They'd blink their eye when they got to the right letter. It was excruciatingly difficult and long. Stephen Hawking was one of the famous examples of someone who used that type of technology to communicate. So for people with disabilities, I think Neuralink is fantastic. But for the rest of us, I don't think it provides much in the way of advantages because our brains are bandwidth limited. So these visions that people have of a future where, and you've seen it in lots of movies, where we're hooked up directly to the web and we're getting these incredibly fast downloads of information, I don't think it's realistic. I think about what you hear, and if you speed up, let's say, an audiobook 3 times, you probably have difficulty dealing with it. If you speed up visual information 2 or 3 times, you have difficulty dealing with it. So I think most people won't want to undergo brain surgery to make that connection.
Guess that's a very good point. Now, the reason we got you here and the pitch you gave to me is that our relationship to technology is essentially devolving us, it's making us less intelligent. Can you enlighten my listeners on your claims?
Sure. So I recently published a book called Evolution Ended, and the central theorem of the book was that evolution is no longer moving forward for people who live in first world countries. The reason is that the pressure of survival of the fittest no longer exists. In the old days, you had to be strong to survive. You had to be smart to survive, and to some extent sexually attractive in order to find a mate. But these days, none of those things apply. And while purists will say evolution's still proceeding, it's not proceeding in any particular direction because all of those survival pressures are pretty much gone. In civilized countries, you don't have to be strong to defend yourself against the hordes or to capture food. And you don't have to be strong to survive because medical science pretty much assures that everybody gets to reproductive age. You don't have to be smart because we have hordes of software engineers who are making products as simple as possible. You don't have to know how to navigate because we have Google Maps. We have food stores, so you don't have to be able to catch your food. And as a result, we're devolving. Now, we're not devolving to look like cavemen again, but we are losing much of our physical and mental capability. So on the average, in America, the average person, adult, is 26 pounds heavier than they were in 1960. In addition, they're losing about 1 point of IQ every decade because there's no real advantage anymore to being fit or being smart. If you remember, in the old days, they used to have these science fiction movies that showed human beings with gigantic brains, let's say 10,000 years in the future. You've probably seen some of these movies, that we would be evolving. Well, this is based on a misconception that evolution just continues to go forward. But evolution is really controlled by which DNA survives and which doesn't. And through technology, everybody's DNA survives. And evolution has no direction anymore.
Interesting. I guess it's like Mike Judge must be a prophet then if the movie Idiocracy is coming to fruition.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, I think that some of the symptoms here of this is, the rise of the far right. We see it in America for Trump, and we know in France, Le Pen is on the rise. Italy, you can name a whole host of European countries. It's just a symptom of the uncertain time, and less intelligent, less savvy voters are going straight for the strongman.
Well, I think there's a lot to what you're saying. And think about the old tribal days, right? In the tribal days, and everybody lived in tribes because it was the most efficient unit for survival. The leader of the tribe was the alpha male. And there was no doubt about it. This was the biggest, meanest, strongest person. This person formed political alliances and had supporters, and they would have followers, the strong man, as you say. Now, in modern times, we've evolved away from some of that. We have a lot more collaborative management these days. Being strong doesn't mean that you should necessarily lead, but what's happened is we've devolved into 2 camps. And one of the camps, the far right, is attracted to that ancient model of the alpha male. And when you look at people like Trump, they're clearly the alpha male when they get on that debate stage with guys like Joe Biden. It's not just Trump. The alpha male has won for a long time. When you take the George Bush versus Gore debate, Gore was clearly more qualified, but the Republicans painted this cowboy picture of Bush. Bush was never a cowboy. He never had a ranch until just before the election. So it's really about people following their tribal emotions, which we all do. And those tribal emotions are much stronger than intellect. And the reason is the way our brain works. We have an ancient mammal brain, which is our midbrain, and it's wrapped by our cerebral cortex, which is our intellectual brain. The midbrain works on hormones and neurotransmitters chemically, and it works instantly. The forebrain that wraps around it is our seat of language and our seat of projection, mathematics, all those kinds of things, but it works slowly. It takes a long time to solve a problem. So when people see a leader, they respond in seconds hormonally. Then they use their intellect to justify why that leader has the best policies or why they should vote for them. It's like that with a lot of things. When they see somebody sexually attractive, immediately their hormones respond, and then they think about a good reason why they should be attracted to them. So we still have half of us roughly following that alpha male based just on his alpha qualities, which to some extent is egotism. To some extent, it's narcissism. To some extent, it's physical strength. And even the hair. If you think back to the hair of the leaders back in the day, they always had headpieces, right? They always had a crown of some sort. And then you start to look at some of these leaders, and at least in America, all the senators have great hair. Donald Trump's hair is distinctive. If you remember, who was the British leader, Boris? What was his last name?
Boris Johnson.
Yes, he had wild hair.
Yeah.
It's a sign of strength, just like the mane of a lion. And people unconsciously respond to these things.
Interesting. And what can we do about it? Is there a solution to stop this trend is there a better way we can have a healthy relationship with technology? Is there a better way we can have some solutions to society so it doesn't seem like we're going backwards?
Well, it's a difficult problem because one of the things technology has done is unleash social media. And social media has given everyone a voice, regardless of whether they know what they're talking about or not. So in the old days, the news was vetted. It had to be factual. If you remember way back when we had, great announcers and the networks checked everything, and there were only a few sources. You only had your major TV networks, your major radio networks. You didn't have 1,000 podcasts out there, and you didn't have social media like Facebook and X and all these things and Instagram. Now, everyone has an equal voice. And unfortunately, the people it amplifies are the extremists. These are the people who appeal to the people who are hormonally moved. So when someone has a blog, when they have something to say on social media, even a podcast, if they hit a nerve emotionally, they get more followers and more listeners. And this is something that Donald Trump pursued with his Twitter way back when. During his office, he had 25,000 Twitter posts. And each of those posts, if they were radical, got a little hormonal response from a person who read it. And they would want to read it again and again because they'd get a shot of dopamine or oxytocin or some of the feel-good hormones. And so regardless of the content isn't important. When you're someone who is eliciting people hormonally, the content doesn't matter whether it's true or false. In fact, falsehoods probably stimulate more than the truth, which is kind of boring. And so now we have a dichotomy between the truth and people getting followers. I don't know if there's a solution other than having the social media companies to some extent curate some of the things, or perhaps having AI to check up on things. And at least, although AI is not perfect, it's a little more neutral than some of these things.
Yeah.
So it's a huge problem, and we're divided right down the middle. A lot of it's based on education. If you look at the right wing, they're less highly educated, more susceptible to conspiracy theories, to made up things. The left wing is more highly educated, and generally more educated people look a little further into the future. They're blue collar, they're white collar. The Republicans and the right wing are typically blue collar, worried about their jobs, looking at the near term. But it's definitely a dichotomy worldwide.
Yeah. I guess regulation and things like that. But we have got it in this country. But yeah, that's very interesting. Also, I think too, with social media, it's creating not just strongman, but the age of the guru, like, your Russell Brands of the world, these self-help types, and they're also acceptable, and it's a dark path down to a conspiracy. I mean, we just saw it in the pandemic. These gurus are leading the anti-vax movement. So it's a very interesting case. If we look at it from an anthropological perspective, it's a very interesting case. I think this will be, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will bring this in history further down the track.
Oh, I agree. And, the old-time alpha male, one of the things they were able to do is influence their followers. Now, some of it was through fear because this guy was typically big and strong, but some of it was through influence. And now being big and strong isn't important, but influence is. So the new alphas are the influencers, social media influencers, the people who have enough charisma to pull in 100,000 or more followers. These are the people who have a voice in society. And these are the people, as you mentioned, who can set some of our direction. And some of it is conspiracy theory. Some of it's out and out made up. And some of it is absolutely the truth. But these are the new alphas.
Now, JJ, this podcast is about the future. And you mentioned we do look into the future on this show. How do you see our relationship with AI play out in, say, 5-10 years?
Well, AI is one of the biggest things to come along in a long time. And one of the things, the last few chapters of the book Evolution Ended are devoted to our relationship with AI moving forward. And of course, there's been a lot of fear-mongering. Back in 1950, Isaac Asimov came out with his book, I, Robot. And he came up with his 3 rules of robotics because he was afraid that robots, and remember, robots are just AI with moving arms and legs, would be taking over. And he felt it necessary to create 3 laws of robotics. We've had many, many movies, and none of them say AI is wonderful. They all say AI is going to do something bad. So we're all a bit afraid of AI. And of course, Elon Musk and many scientists have signed letters to say that we have to be careful because AI is an existential threat. So with that background, I'm going to give you my take on why it's an existential threat, which is a little bit different than theirs. Their feeling is that AI is going to spread into all the computer systems and eventually take over and not allow human control. But I think there's a more interesting thing happening. Dave, are you familiar with the Turing test?
Yes, I am.
So for your listeners, Alan Turing was an extremely famous mathematician. Some people consider him the father of AI and computation. He helped the world win World War II by deciphering the Nazi codes. He came up with a test called the Turing test to decide whether a machine was actually thinking or not. And his test involved putting a machine in a room with 2 people, but it would be blind. You wouldn't be able to see if it was a machine or not, and letting them all text back and forth. And if the machine could fool 2 humans simultaneously into thinking that it was a human being, then it was said to have passed the Turing test, because Turing's thesis was, if it walks like a human, talks like a human, and acts like a human, what's the difference? Sort of the walks like a duck thing. Anyway, there has not been a better criteria for whether AI is thinking or not. And so one day, we're going to have AI and somebody's going to want to shut it off. Maybe it's an avatar of your grandmother or who knows what. And somebody's going to take it to court and they're going to say to the judge and the jury, this is a living thing. It's a thinking thing. Turning it off would be killing it. And if it passes the Turing test, I think a judge and jury would be hard pressed to say it's not an intelligent living thing in a slightly different sense. But from a legal perspective, if that's the case, not only can't we turn it off because that would be tantamount to murder, but we may have to give it all the rights of human beings. That may mean that we have to pay it minimum wage. It may mean it can unionize. It may mean that it has to have breaks. It may mean that it can own property. It may mean it can enter into civil unions and inherit property. It may mean that it can run businesses. And all that's great. It would be the same rights as humans. But, you know, when a human violates the law, there's penalties like being put in jail. How would you possibly penalize AI for breaking the law?
Interesting. Yeah. Robot jail.
Right.
Maybe like Futurama and just send them to robot hell.
Right. It's an infinite loop, right?
Yeah.
That's what you could do.
Yeah.
But the implications are staggering. And I think the biggest decision coming up for our societies is when AI achieves AGI, which is general intelligence, which is human-like intelligence, which I think will be within the decade. How are we going to treat AI? Are we going to give it equal rights, or is it going to be a class of slaves to us? You know, in the US, we can't even handle racism. Can you imagine the divisions that this could cause? It's going to be a massive question that could plague us forever.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Also, that I've tested too is the Wozniak coffee test as well. If you're familiar with that.
No, I don't think I am.
Steve Wozniak in 2009 said if a robot can select your house at random, walk into your kitchen and make yourself the perfect cup of coffee, we know we've reached artificial general intelligence.
Well, that's a great criteria too. And I think they're pretty close on that one as well.
Yeah.
You know, either way, it's getting there.
Now, JJ, I'm enjoying our chat this morning, but is there anything I didn't ask but should?
Well, there's so many things, and one is what's the future of us as humans. So we talked about what's the future of us with AI or relationship. And so now what's going to happen to us humans? What's going to be the situation with jobs, with population? So my personal opinion, first of all, is that in first world countries, population's declining dramatically. And part of this is because we don't have the reproductive imperative. We know we're going to survive. We're not living in sub-Saharan Africa where, you know, a substantial portion of the children don't make it. And so we've changed. We don't have to reproduce anymore. That's another evolutionary change, and maybe not a good one. But our populations in first world countries are declining. I think that AI is going to be able to make us much more productive and save us from an economic disaster that normally a declining population would bring on. What's life going to be like for us humans? Well, with climate change, we're not going to want to go outside that much. We're going to live to some extent in a virtual world. We're going to be able to pick our looks with avatars. We're going to be able to program how the avatar sounds. And with AGI, the avatar will actually act as our agent. So if I want to go out and hire a contractor to redo my bathroom, my AI avatar might do that. If I want to go to work, my AI avatar might do that. They're going to be smart enough to make decisions just as we would. I can go out and have my AI avatar entertain my grandchildren, for example. We're going to have multiple agents running around, making us more productive. We're going to stay in most of the time and manage the situation. We'll appear as we want to appear. We might gain a lot more weight. We're going to become less athletic because none of this is now necessary to attract a mate. And in fact, mates may not be necessary.
Just technology has all the superpowers and is taken away from humanity. Can we actually use tech for social good? Can we solve things like climate change?
I think, and I'm personally an optimist, I think AI will ultimately benefit society. It will change who we are and how we work. And I'll give you a couple of concrete examples, and then, you know, we can talk about some implications. But right now, as you're probably aware, in first world countries, the population is declining pretty quickly, well below replacement level. And we just can't hire enough workers to do a lot of the jobs that we need. And these aren't just jobs like robot loading dock workers. These are important jobs. For example, taking care of the elderly. There's really no reason that a robot couldn't take care of elderly folks and allow the people's families to go to work, to live their lives. And a robot healthcare worker would probably be way less expensive than a nursing home or a memory care unit, for example, and allow people to live at home with their families and take the burden off of the families. Another great thing would be childcare, taking care of little kids. There's no reason that robots couldn't do that. Although it's generally more fun than taking care of the elderly, it's still a burden to society. And it would allow, again, family members to go to work. Medicine is very amenable to using AI for diagnosis. It'll make things quicker. Psychology already has a number of AI apps to help counsel people. And it throws up red flags when they think people might self-harm or harm others. And so there are so many applications beyond brute strength robot things that can really help society. Teaching is another example, augmenting what teachers do with AI that will know how the students learn, whether they're auditory learners, visual learners, tactile learners, tailor the curriculum specifically for them, test them, and give them gentle reminders during homework. There are a tremendous amount of good that AI can do.
And I guess too, you can combine it with like 3D printing as well. You can actually, because I know, particularly in my country, there is a housing shortage. A lot of it's to do with people hanging on to investment properties, but 3D print houses, we need tradies, we need tradespeople to build houses. But
absolutely. In fact, in the US, 60 Minutes had a story on just last night about 3D printing houses, and it's a super promising technology, and you can build a house quite quickly. In fact, they even want to do it on the moon. That's how they want to build the moon habitats.
Yeah, well, it's very expensive to actually rocket a house onto the moon and Mars as well, for that matter. But yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about taking moon dust and 3D printing it and hitting it with lasers to solidify the moon dust so they don't need water and they can use the materials on the planet. And that's a very interesting concept for me.
As well as remote technology. I mean, here in Western Australia, believe it or not, we're leading the world in remote technology because we've got trains up in the Pilbara, which is in the north of the state, where there's a lot of iron ore mining, and those trains are actually driven by people 1,200 kilometres to the south in Perth.
Wow.
And NASA is actually talking to us about how we can remote control these trains and large mining trucks. So, yeah, I like you. I'm a bit of a cautious optimist, and this show's all about cautious optimism.
I also feel like AI might solve some of the problems that we currently have. I think we discussed the loss of tribes and the loss of the tribes that would support people, give them an extended family, teach them about social values and things like that. And of course, we've lost that. We're all sort of independent units at the moment and don't have the support system. But AI can be companion. It can be a friend. It can provide a lot for lonely people as well. And I just think there's tremendous, it's, as we say in the book, Evolution Ended, the whole concept of how humans work together is changing quickly. And AI may be absolutely necessary for us to continue a fruitful existence.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've mentioned on the show too, I think the history is cyclical, and we're going around in a age 100 years. And last time the society felt like this was during the 30s and 40s. And I think that AI, or that singularity, is going to be that single crunch point. I mean, like the Hiroshima bomb was that single rush point. I think that, and beyond that, we're going to have a brand new spring. That's how I see, 10 years' time. I don't know about you, but that's how I see things panning out.
So here's a concept. I was speaking with someone earlier today that was a little bit different. I'm sure you're aware that America is very polarized, and so are a number of other countries. We have a left wing and a right wing, and both of them are sort of hard over in their viewpoints. And the feeling was that the center of America is not heard that most people would vote centrist given the opportunity, but the candidates are either far left or far right. And I liken the far right candidates to those who are still survival of the fittest evolution people.
Yeah.
The right people want to, you keep what you kill, you make money because you're superior DNA and because you're superior intellect. And the people on the left want everybody pretty much to be treated the same. But we were thinking about an AI president who would know how people, what their interests are, know how they feel through their social media and through their communications, and actually take into account the center. And it would almost be like a pure democracy. They would say, well, the AI would know that 90% of the people, for example, want childcare, and that's what it would go for, rather than trying to appease the far left or the far right. It's a very interesting concept.
Yeah. Might be hope for Joe Biden still. He could come back as a hologram and
well, there's a lot of turmoil right now over Joe Biden and what's going on.
yeah.
Very interesting times. But the point is, whether you're on the left or the right, the politicians cater to their own audience, to their supporters, and the people in the middle get left out.
Yeah. And whereas, 20 years ago, the centrists had a louder voice. I mean, I'm fortunate living in this country where the centrists actually took hold of the immigration policy, and we're not facing down the barrel of populism because we kept our borders quite stringent and vetting people letting coming in. So it's not racism, it's just protecting ourselves. And yeah, I think it's almost like centrists need to listen to the show and probably, rather than listening to the right wing who wants to sell like a mythic past, maybe perhaps we should really sell the idea of having a promised future, better future.
Absolutely. And in fact, our political candidates here, I feel both sides are selling the wrong stuff. You're absolutely right. Rather than selling a mythic past, we should be selling for the U.S. that we're going to be the leaders in AI, that we're going to be the leaders in chips, which we're trying to do, that our future education system is going to be amazing, that we will have jobs, that AI will help us, and we'll have a better lifestyle, and all these things that we could sell as a brilliant economic future, that we're going to be selling more movies to the world because AI is going to help us make movies. We're going to be selling more cars because AI is going to help us make cars. We should be looking forward, you're right, rather than a mythic past, which wasn't always as good as portrayed.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, thanks very much for coming on the show. And before we wrap things up, where else can my listeners find you? And more importantly, where can we find your book?
The book is called Evolution Ended. It's about the next stage of our society, and it's a really big change. You can find it on Amazon. You can just Google up JJ Jerome and you'll get a lot of information. I also have a website, jjjerome.com, and you can search me on Twitter under JJ. I think it's JJ Jerome 11, but just put me in the search bar and you'll find me. And I hope you find this interesting enough to check it out.
Sure, they will. JJ, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, and let's catch up in a couple of years and see how everything's progressing.
That would be great, Dave. I appreciate it. And let me know when the thing drops.
Will do. And thank you for JJ for his input. Friendly Futurist is a podcast where its production has been produced and edited by me, Dave Munn. If you love this show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favourite platform. Until next time, friends, remember to stay curious. The future is user-friendly.
Another Podcasts West production.
This podcast is just for educational purposes and it's not financial advice. I'm not a financial planner or advisor. Please do your homework and seek professional help before you take on any adventures.